from Maxim Institute, Marianne Spurtle. Marianne, kia ora, good morning.
Good morning, Andrew.
Are you a Jenga aficionado?
I can't remember the last time I played, but
Okay.
I have to say, looking at some news recently, it brought back memories of Jenga towers.
Yeah, it's all about balance and coordination, which is perhaps a skill set that they should put on the hiring list for certain government departments, because Jenga as a metaphor for the way at least a couple of government departments are run at the moment, some teetering towers perhaps. First up, though, for those who aren't familiar, talk us through the rules. How's Jenga played on a good day?
Well, yeah, if you're not a 3-year-old, the goal of Jenga is to,
I'm not, just in case anybody's asking. Yeah.
because I mean, they've got different goals. They just want to see things fall over.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you grow up and want to build things, the goal of Jenga, you pull out those little tiny logs and you balance them on top. And the last unlucky person who can't keep the middle holding loses the whole tower.
Yeah.
So you're basically deconstructing the tower and building it on the top.
And you're trying to make it less and less stable, hoping that the next person is the one that pulls out the last straw, as it were, or the last plank. However, this is not a model that architects or engineers should follow. This leads to unstable structures, and that's what we've seen, particularly in the health system recently.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to pick on Health New Zealand, or well, I did. I picked on Health New
You did,
Zealand and the
yeah.
Ministry of Education because there were some obvious hooks there. But I think this is just endemic when you've got institutions, they're unelected, they're essentially monopolies,
Mm-hmm.
and they have extraordinary job security once you're within, despite the complaints about some of these departments being cut.
Yeah.
It's very unlike any other workplace.
Mm-hmm.
So basically people have to serve the public out of the, the love of the job, love
Yeah.
of people. And it's actually very, very easy for any of these bodies to fall into the trap of becoming about themselves.
Mm. And
And
I think with the Jenga metaphor, and of course not a criticism of anybody who works in health and education in New
no,
Zealand, but if there's too few planks at the bottom of the structure and too many in the top, if there's too many managers and not enough workers, the whole system becomes unstable. Certainly that's what we've seen in both health and education.
yeah, and the Deloitte review of Health New Zealand was so enlightening and it could be applied to others as well.
Yeah.
But in this case, it was centralized. And what the review pointed out was that they actually disconnected a lot of management from frontline staff. And you had people in the middle who were saying, yep, budget goals are being met. They weren't. You had people hiring nurses who go, we know that there are salary rises coming down the pipeline.
Yep.
We're just assuming Health New Zealand's got that covered. They didn't.
Wow.
So you had very, very poor communication, poor accountability, all the things that you really need, especially in a big organization.
I mean, this is in particular because we went from one DHB to rule them all, essentially, and at the time the changes were made, it's a once in a generation change. It's going to bring all of these efficiencies. In fact, the opposite happened.
Yeah, because they were predicting, I didn't realize this at the time until I read stuff recently, they were predicting a surplus.
Mm-hmm.
Went from what, $500 million projected surplus to $1 billion deficit,
Wow.
and what did we get out of it? Well, healthcare's gotten worse, so not better healthcare.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
if you spend more
down to
money,
management.
you expect better results, not the opposite. But what we're left with is just a pile of bricks on the ground. And hey, don't even start me with Dunedin Hospital. Actually, another case in
Yeah.
point in that regard. Is it a similar story, but perhaps different factors when it comes to education, Marianne?
Yeah, when it comes to the ministry itself, looking into numbers, I think numbers can be boring, but they paint a really good picture when it comes to where the incentives are. Looked up the median public service salary. It's now $101,700,
Okay.
whereas in New Zealand it's roughly 70,000.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you look at education itself, because the rationale there is, well, public sector jobs tend to be, higher level of skill and training and stuff than some at the overall workforce, which maybe not. But look at education. The average teacher salary is a touch under $80,000, and for a teacher at Max is out just over 100.
Yep.
The Ministry of Education average is 112,300,
Wow.
and those are people in the, with similar training, knowledge area, and you can't tell me that just because they're working for the ministry, their salary should be $30,000 plus more a year, because a lot of those are former teachers.
Now, and of course, this is the Jenga metaphor kicks in. It takes teachers away from the front line and incentivize them to go to the top of the tower where things are unstable. Also, a bit of a gross underestimate of how many teachers were needed for schools this year.
Well, and this was, I mean, it'd be funny if it wasn't actually really painful for people who are in education and for anyone who's got a kid in school. A really basic function of the Ministry of Education is to go, do we have what we need? Teachers.
Yep.
Key thing that they need. And they were estimating that there'd be in primary schools a surplus. And Erica Stanford and principals were like, that doesn't sound right.
Mm-hmm.
And then this past year, they redid the estimates going forward and went, oh, we forgot to factor in a few things like teacher release time, which the ministry requires.
Yeah.
I think it's 1 day in 10 teachers are not in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
I know teachers, I've had them tell me, I'd rather not have the release time. I'd rather have the consistency, but that's the rules. Because of that release time, you need more teachers to cover that.
10% more teachers to cover a 1 day in 10 not being on the books, as it were.
And the ministry forgot to factor that in.
Wow.
And went, oh, actually, we've got a big old deficit of teachers.
This is basic numeracy skills. Yeah, the basic numeracy skills from our education system. But I suppose when it comes to faulty towers, if you could, we're changing metaphors here a little bit. I mean, honestly, we're playing the wrong game, because when it comes to things as important as health and education, and these are things that will win or lose you in an election if you get it wrong. Should we be even playing Jenga? Shouldn't we have more of a system which results in stability and communication and cohesion and all of those good principles of engineering? If we're gonna build something which has got a bit of strength and resilience to it, not just some fragile ivory tower.
Yeah, like Jenga backwards, where you end up with a nice, solid, contained block where everything supports each other.
Yep.
And one thing I mentioned in the column, because one of the things that came to mind as I was looking through some of these stats, was the story of Dale Williams, the former mayor of Otahonga. There's a TED Talk. First time I saw him speak was actually at a Maxim event before I was working for Maxim.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent story. He's a motorcycle mechanic, became mayor of Otahonga.
Yep. And
they actually leveraged problems to solve each other. So they had industries that were looking to exodus because they weren't able to find employees.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very, oversimplification. They also had a lot of youth dropping out, leaving town, staying in town and causing problems.
Yep.
And one of the solutions they had was to, in partnership with Wintech, get in Otahonga training set up that was basically cleared by local industry, saying, if somebody gets this qualification, they're guaranteed a job.
Wow.
The completion rates went way up, youth crime went way down. It was very much a community-built solution to specific problems. And the people who were in governance there were all about actually doing very practical things.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to do from Wellington.
It certainly is. And I mean, this is a fantastic example of things being done well. And honestly, I'm not sure if people know Otahonga. I've driven through it a few times. I have stayed there once. If we can get a success story out of Otahonga, then there's hope for every community in New Zealand, honestly. But it has to be happening at the ground level, not in some ivory tower, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's certain things that the ivory tower is equipped to do, and then there are other things that we shouldn't expect them to do, because really that has got to happen at the local level to be successful. Now, health's one of those big, messy things that you can't just say, oh, just localize it all. But centralizing it definitely didn't help.
Certainly. And hey, maybe we should change the rules of the game, or even the game itself. Maybe if we're playing Lego, instead of Jenga. We would have better results all round, unless you accidentally step on some, and then you might need to join the waiting list at the hospital to get that seen to. Marianne, thank you so much for this article. It's going to be on the Maxim website, I understand, a little bit later this week. Thanks for what you do. Thanks for joining us today.
You too. Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.